Hi, my name is Haviland Stillwell, and welcome to the brand spanking new show on BroadwayWorld.com, Flirt with Haviland Stillwell, because that's me. Flirt is a show where I'm going to be interviewing various stars about the things that they're into, things that they're not into, and we'll see where it goes from there. So our first show, we will be talking to the star of Curtains on Broadway, David Hyde Pierce. Hi, David.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So we have a connection.
Yes.
Play 6 Degrees for a second.
Okay.
My mother is a producer at Ojai Playwrights Conference.
Now, what's your mom's name?
Cynthia Stillwell.
Oh.
So she
yeah.
was telling me wonderful stories about you and kind of, regaling me with various amazing things about your personality.
Good. She didn't tell any of the naughty stories. That's
no
fantastic.
naughty stories.
Yeah.
It was all good.
Ojai is a great, it's a dear friend, Helen Gordon, who was on the board there for a long time up in California, in the mountains north of Los Angeles. It's this fantastic theater festival that they have up there in this beautiful community. So yeah, I've gone up there a few years to do readings and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you like doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, especially when it's helping out new playwrights. And actually my original connection there, one of the reasons I went up was because Chris Durang had stuff done up there. And
right.
my first professional gig was with one of his plays. So
right.
it sort of goes around.
And was that your first Broadway show?
That was my first Broadway show.
That was your first professional gig?
Yeah, Beyond Therapy it was called.
Okay, and before that, I know according to Wikipedia.
Then it's true.
Which
you
is.
Can stop right there, it's absolutely true.
Exactly. You were a security guard at Bloomingdale's?
Well, they're wrong.
They're wrong?
Yeah, they sort of conflated two different stories.
Okay,
yeah.
Tell me the story.
Before I ever came to New York, there's a performing arts center in my hometown, and I worked briefly for one summer as a security guard there.
Okay.
No one thought it was a good idea, but that's what I was doing. And then when I came to New York, my first actual job in New York, I came in the fall of '81, I worked at Bloomingdale's selling ties.
Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you like that?
I think I would have been better as a security guard.
Yeah?
I would have sold more ties as a security guard, or I would have saved more lives as a tie salesman. I don't know. But I wasn't good at either job.
Okay, and so then you decided, I'll go into acting?
I was forced to. There was no future for me in ties. No, the thing, you know what, I never, fortunately, had to be a waiter. And it's the same thing as ties. I would be terrible, I'm not good at selling people on things. When I was a kid in New York, and I rarely bring me in, but I'd go in and audition for commercials, and I just sucked. I couldn't say, I just couldn't do it.
Fantastic water.
Yeah. If you don't drink this, I don't know.
You're going to die,
yeah,
whatever.
It was hopeless, so I'm very bad at that. So fortunately, I'm not in a sales profession.
Okay, well that's interesting. So you're in a Broadway show right now, Curtains.
Yes, buy it.
Buy Curtains. I saw you on Tuesday night, and it was great.
Oh,
I really
thanks.
enjoyed it. And so you've been with the show now. You guys were out of town before you came into Broadway, yeah?
Yeah. We started out, we rehearsed in New York and then went to LA to do our out-of-town tryout at the Amundsen, the big theater center theater group out there. And they're also co-producers of the show. And so we tried it out there and ran it for a few months last summer.
Okay.
And then came back here beginning of last year, just about a year ago in January, re-rehearsed it and previewed in February and opened in March.
Okay, and how long are you with the show now?
I am, you mean like from now on?
Yeah.
How long will I be with it? Through end of summer.
Okay.
Like that weekend right before Labor Day weekend, I think is my last.
Are you still
weekend.
having fun with it?
Yes.
Okay.
We were actually all just talking about this because we're in well beyond 300, I keep wanting to say episodes, I know that's not right.
Yeah.
More than 300 shows now in New York, not counting previews, not counting LA. It's virtually the original company. Some of the ensemble folks have left.
That's fantastic.
And we're still having a good time. We're still even having a good time when we're doing put-in rehearsals.
Oh, really?
Oh, that's my phone.
Oh,
I'm
that's
sorry.
Awesome.
If it's the president, tell him I'm not here.
This is the presidential
It's
suite.
the presidential
you don't know
suite.
who's going to call.
Maybe it's a call for him or her.
Yeah, I know that being in a long run, people have people who aren't performers are always saying, oh, how do you do the show that long, and how do you? But I mean,
how was it for you? Like, you've been in shows. Would you?
Yeah. I feel like, for me, it definitely, it just started to feel like a job in a lot of the situations. Like sometimes, I would go in and just be like, oh, I don't want to do this tonight. But then sometimes it's a different situation.
Right.
I think it depends on the people who are there and kind of the energy.
It definitely depends on the company and the energy of the company. It depends on the piece you're doing. And also it must depend on what your part is.
Right.
I mean, I'm really lucky in this show, both with the people I'm doing and the piece that I'm doing, but also the part is one that you can find new stuff. I'll be finding new stuff right up to the last minute. So to be honest, I don't ever have a here we go show.
That's great.
Yeah, and
That's
it's also
really great.
this is a very sort of fun show, and audiences like it. So it's not a slog that you have to face.
Yeah, I actually,
Medea.
Before you guys were out at the Amundsen, I auditioned for the role that Jill Pace is now playing.
Oh,
So I, would have been your love interest, and
I'm sorry but we didn't read together, did we?
No. I mean, this was 3 years ago or something. I don't know, or whenever.
Yeah.
So yeah. I was thinking of this expression that I always hear, and people always will say to me, like, "Well, what's going to happen when you make it? What is going to be when you make it in the business?"
Right.
And I was thinking with you, obviously, I mean, when you're walking down the street, people know you from Frasier and from other projects you've done. But what do you think that even means, like making it? Have you ever felt like even after you started to become well known and everything, and people knew your face, that you had moments where you're like, oh God, I'm never going to work again, or just any kind of things?
I think that making it is like committing white-collar crime. In the sense that I bet most of the people who commit white-collar crime don't really realize that they've done it until it's already happened. Little things happen here and there, and suddenly, oh, I have all this money in my account, and it's not mine.
Right.
And similarly, I think with me, I've been very lucky, and there have been so many great things that have happened in my career, like Beyond Therapy, the first job being this great Broadway show with a wonderful company. I did on and on and on, all these things. There wasn't ever a moment, even with getting Frasier, you get a TV show like that, you never know if it's going to be have a second week. And then it does, and then the ratings are good, and then you kind of turn around and it's been 11 years.
Right.
And now I could certainly say, yeah, I guess I've made it, but I couldn't pinpoint when it happened. And I just know that I have been able to, throughout all these years, been able to do parts I love, working with people I respect, and I guess that's the it that I always want to make.
Right. Do you have a favorite character that you've played or a favorite project you've worked on?
Oh boy, that's a good question. There's a few. Niles on Frasier was an incredible opportunity and a great part, and allowed me to really explore a lot of different things. I got to do a play with Uta Hagen a few years ago in Los Angeles, and that experience is where it was a two-person play. It was just me and her. That experience was something that will always be not only a highlight, but also something I always go back to. My experience with her informs everything I have done or will do since then.
What was she like to work with?
Oh, she was a hoot. I mean, she was tough, but she was so dedicated and so inspiring, and one of those people where when you're on stage with her sense of the reality and the sort of the depth with which she approached a project just was like passed on to you through osmosis. And that was the first time I remember really having the experience of not doing a play. That it was a show where I would walk in her apartment door, she'd be there, and then we'd just go, and however much hours later it was over. And it was like that every single night, and it was always different, and we never tried to make it different. It was just that. I learned so much about that from her.
Yeah. And
I think that was what led me to be able to, like in this play, in Curtains, even though it's a musical, and Miss Hagen was certainly not a musical star, but those basic things about letting it live, letting what the little tiny stuff that happens between you and the other actor, letting that be alive every night, including the stuff you wouldn't expect from reading her books, like those great communications that happen between us on stage when it's a crappy audience.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And like she would say some funny line and it wouldn't get a laugh. And this is the great Uta Hagen, and she'd look at me like, and then we'd go on. Well, she was full of all that. And she was very salty, great. At one point in the second act, we had to come in laughing from a party, and so we'd always tell each other dirty jokes, and she had many more good ones than I did. I loved her as a person and
I feel
on
like
stage.
audiences are always really surprised to know that on stage, when we're in the middle of a scene, that we are having those communications. Like,
Well-
the audience is terrible, or I am, need to go to the bathroom, or
Yes.
whatever it is that we're having that has zero to do with the show itself.
Well,
sometimes.
I've learned that myself because before Spamalot, I had never done a musical, not in any kind of professional
Okay.
sense. And when you're doing a play, there's a little bit of room for that, but not quite as much because it tends to be in a much more intimate space. What you tend to be doing as actors has less room for anything but the actual things that the characters are doing. Whereas I now see in a musical that you can, while still being completely responsible and playing your character and being faithful to the show and not selling it out for a second, the life of the show, especially in a long run, is those moments of real communication where
Absolutely.
without saying a word, you're saying to your partner, I just stepped on your foot, didn't I? And she's saying, yes, you did. How much did it hurt? A lot. I'm going to get you later. With
Right.
no word spoken. It's just...
Exactly.
And it's fantastic, and it just adds another layer. And from an audience perspective, all you get is that there's a real connection between the people. Which
Right.
is, if that's not there, then you might as well go home.
It's true. It's very true. So, other than Ms. Hagen, who have been some good people you've loved working with?
I would say, okay, I worked at Williamstown up in Massachusetts, great summer theater. This was when I was in college. I went to Yale, and Nikos Sakaropoulos, who founded Williamstown, taught at Yale, and he would bring some of us up in the summers to be unpaid slave labor. And so I got to work with, right at the get-go, it was Blythe Danner, it was Colleen Dewhurst, Chris Reeve was there at that time, who else? Frank Langella, John Glover. It was it continues to be an amazing company of professional actors. Edward Herman, Austin Pendleton. So that was my first experience of working with professionals, and they were like the best in the business.
Yeah.
And starting with Beyond Therapy, and John Lithgow and Diane Wiest were the stars of that show, and they set such a great example. My first experience of what the leads of a show can do and how
Right.
they can be. They were so welcoming to me. I was brand new, and on and on. I got to work with Peter Brook, great British director Peter Brook. We did a production of The Cherry Orchard out at BAM. That was Brian Dennehy was in, and Linda Hunt, and I could just go through a list.
Right,
They're
of
on and
course.
on and on. So many good people.
Of course, yeah. So you worked on The Simpsons a little
Yes.
bit. And how was that?
I loved it. I've done The Simpsons twice, and I did it originally because Frasier was fairly new when they first did it, and Kelsey, of course, has the recurring role of Sideshow Bob,
Right.
the evil clown, and so they had decided when Frasier became kind of big to have me on in an episode titled "The Brother from Another Sitcom," and so I played Sideshow Cecil. And the great thing about it was a lot of times in animation, including on The Simpsons. You don't actually get to be in the same room when you record. You might be all together for a read-through, but then for technical reasons and just practical reasons, they record your part and they record his part. But because it was Kels and me and we had that rapport, they let us record the scenes together.
Oh, great.
And that was a blast, and I think was the right way to do it. And so we just did an episode recently, and the same thing. We got to play together again. And it's fun because especially now that Frasier's been off the air for a few years, to get to sort of fall back into those roles, and yet it's some demonic, perverse version of Niles and Frasier.
Right.
It was a blast.
That's great. What's like a really bizarre thing that happened on the set of Frasier?
Oh, let's see. A bizarre thing on Frasier that I can tell you. Well, there was the day the dog went insane.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good story.
Yeah, it was early on. It was about the second episode, because the dog originally, all the dog did was stare. That was the big conceit of Eddie the dog, that it made Frasier very uncomfortable because the dog would just sit there and stare at him. But then the writers discovered that the dog was really good at doing tricks. So they would have him, go and steal something off the dining table, or they'd have him go grab a Barbie doll and bury it in the sofa, or various things. And they were so excited about this that each week they'd give him a new trick, until the week that he snapped. And because all he had to do in this one episode, we were filming this in front of the live audience, All he had to do was go out and hit his mark, which meant just going out and sit by Dad's chair. And instead, he went out and cycled through every single trick he had learned from the past, like 5 episodes. So he was up on the chair, and he was up on the table, and he went and hid in the sofa, and then he ran around, and we were just lost, and that's when we realized, you know, even doggy brains can only take so much.
The dog is insane.
Yeah, so they backed off, and fortunately let some of the rest of us have a shot at things.
Have you worked with animals before that experience?
I work with a giant plastic horse in curtains, and I love it.
Yes.
Let me think, what else? I've worked with, have I worked with animals before? Not on stage. I'm trying to think. In film, no. I should tell you, though, that Deborah Monk's cat, Max, is in Charlie Wilson's War.
Really?
Yes, he's on the desk, Tom Cruise's desk, if you see the movie. I mean, Tom Hanks' desk, sorry.
Is he on IMDb?
He certainly should be. I think they had to actually cut him out of a lot of scenes because he just stole the whole movie. So, but that's a very important.
I feel like that should be in her bio or something.
Probably is.
In her Playbill bio.
Yeah, well, they may not have gotten it in yet. But
like a stage
she's
mom,
very proud.
sort of like her character in Curtains.
Yes, that's right.
You know? A stage cat mother or something ridiculous. You recently, last year, came out sort of publicly, very publicly, in a CNN interview. And I'm wondering, I know you're always very specific about not speaking too much about your private life. And I'm wondering why it came up at this point.
It was, it wasn't CNN, it was a, what was it? Associated Press, it was AP. And I'll tell you, it was Michael Kuchwara. And what had happened was I had mentioned it previously in interviews. I had done an NPR radio interview a few years before, I think when we were starting Curtains, where I happened to mention my partner. And the time I did that, I thought, okay, well, you know, it's time, I'll just say it. No one cared. And years ago, when Frasier was first on the air, we were in the tabloids. We had tabloid reporters outside our house taking pictures. We got our pictures in the, you know, in the Globe or whatever, the pictures of us walking the dog and all that.
Was that scary?
It was a real invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
So back then when I did interviews and people would ask about my private life, I didn't talk about it because I didn't want to, because I felt like, A, it was out there because of the tabloids, and I just was kind of shell-shocked by all of that. And years went by and basically people stopped caring. And then I was doing the interview with Michael, and we were just talking, and it was an interview where he wasn't sort of hunting for anything. We were just talking about, and he asked me about why I went to move to Los Angeles. The reason I moved to Los Angeles was because my partner Brian had wanted to try out being a writer in television. So I just told him that. And he said, have you talked about this before? And I said, well, I've mentioned him a few times, but it wasn't that big a deal. And that was kind of it. And so it was, you know, I was in a little bit of an odd position because on the one hand, I thought most people, anyone who cared, probably knew. And so to make some big statement about it would be like, you know, George Bush calling a press conference to say he's a Republican. I thought that would be odd. But at the same time, I also didn't want to make it seem like I was trying to conceal something, because we've never done that, and I didn't want to do that.
Right.
So it just seemed like an opportunity to talk about it in a way where it was in the context of our life together. It wasn't a big public deal. And
it does seem frustrating, though, sometimes that it feels like, you know, you weren't making a big deal out of it. You didn't, you know, post it on some blog or whatever, making like a big coming out statement or something.
Right.
But people did make such a big deal out of it, it seems.
Well, for 2.5 seconds.
Well, yes, of course.
And the funny thing is, a lot of people were, I don't know if they were frustrated or what, but a lot of people said, oh, he was outed, or he was this, or he was that. And it was like, fine. You know, that's the other thing I discovered, is that people have their own agendas and their own needs. And some of the reaction was extremely positive. My favorite reaction, a friend told me there was one on the internet from someone in Europe who said, who cares, isn't he like 100? So that to me was I think I take that with me as my most supportive, you know.
That's humbling.
Yeah, but seriously, and then it was over, and it's like, I'm certainly glad I did it, because you know, although I feel like we've always lived our life openly, I never wanted to feel like we were in the position that we were apologizing or covering up anything we weren't. I
Right.
just also don't like being told what I am supposed to and not supposed to say, and what I'm
Right.
supposed to talk about and not supposed to talk about. So I wanted to say it on my own terms.
Before then, or at any point in your career, do you ever feel like you didn't get a role because someone knew you were gay, or has that ever been an issue at all?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I think probably I haven't gotten roles because of everything about who I am, just like I've gotten parts because
Right.
of everything who I am. So no, and I think certainly, well, like Frasier, all those roles that I got, everyone who was in the business of putting me in those roles knew exactly. They knew me. They knew my life. There was
Sure.
no secrets there. So. If there are jobs that I missed, I have a feeling that's okay.
That's great. I mean, that's actually really great to hear.
Yeah.
I know that people just have very odd ideas, I think, and my dream is that not just as actors, but as the world, it will be a total non-issue.
I think it will. I think it will, and in many places it already is. In many places it's still
well, like our government.
Yeah, like so many things. There's a lot of race and everything else. There's still a lot of places where it's shocking how clever we are at dividing ourselves from each other.
Have you been into this election drama?
Well, I've been following it like all of us.
Yeah.
We're all so excited to have people that we can believe in, to have more than one choice of people that we can believe in, and people we think could actually maybe lead the country. I think it's a great time.
Yeah, I agree. I have this theory, though, that because of the writers' strike, we don't have any TV, that everyone is watching CNN and MSNBC and sort of getting into it like as if it's
That's the
our
most
drama.
depressing theory I've ever heard. That's
I really
terrible.
feel like, that it's just...
I was hoping that people just finally were
Well,
mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. But you're
I
right,
hope
it's probably
so.
just because like Lost isn't on.
Oh. They're like, I can't watch any more reruns.
Damn.
I need Keith Olbermann. But it is actually really exciting, and I'll hear from 19-year-olds who are really fired up about
Exactly,
it.
yeah.
And I know when I was the first election I was able to vote in was not this last one, but the one before, and this last one. And I was so excited, to get to vote. But I grew up in a very political family, and most people I know who are even in college now, until recently, there was just none of that.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. No, I had friends who, even as recently as the last election, would say, "Yeah, I don't want to vote," and I just thought,
Why?
What do you mean you don't want to vote? It's like, do you see what's happening? Do you have no? And the reality was, no, they had no opinion. That's. It's one of the crazy things about this country. We're so insulated. We're so big that we can kind of live our lives without thinking about anyone else, which is what drives everyone else crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And in New York, especially.
Well, in New York, we learned the hardest way that we can't do that.
Were you here that day?
No, I was in California that day.
Yeah. So tell me about your hoodie.
Oh, this is actually cool. This is part of I work with the Alzheimer's Association, and they have this new campaign called their Champions Campaign. We've just hit the mark where 5 million Americans have Alzheimer's, which is terrible.
Oh, God.
So what they're trying to do is get 5 million Americans to go to the Alzheimer's Association, sort of register, sign up, do something to help move the cause along. And they have things like this hoodie and T-shirts that you can buy. One says "Move," one says "Voice," and one says "Open." And they're purposely sort of enigmatic and designed to get people to ask questions. And the idea is that they're trying to move the cause forward. They're trying to get people to open their minds and their wallets. It's an issue which, unfortunately, has been on the back burner, and funding for research has dropped off in the last years, and it's a disease that's getting more and more prevalent. So that even while a lot of other diseases, they've actually had a decrease in the death rate. In the last 4 years, Alzheimer's has gone up 30% in the number of deaths. It's now like the 7th leading cause of death in America.
Wow.
So it's a huge deal. So I wear this wherever I can as a representative of the association, and one of the exciting things about talking about the election, is there's so much talk about health care.
Yes.
And Alzheimer's in particular, people don't understand this, but it is because of who it affects, how it affects them, and how it also impacts the family.
Right.
It's a hugely expensive disease, and it takes a long time, and it's a terminal illness. It's going to be, we're going to be spending, by the middle of the century, on Alzheimer's alone, what we're spending now in all of Medicare and Medicaid. So you can't really talk about health care without talking about Alzheimer's. So that's why I'm glad that this issue is finally coming into the forefront, because we're sort of running out of time to be able to do the research before, like, my generation, the baby boomers, and there's a ton of us, start all getting this, and
right.
the system gets overwhelmed.
Yeah, and it is, you mentioned what an impact it has on my grandfather passed away of Alzheimer's, and yours did too. Is that,
yes,
am I right?
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well,
well, you know then.
yeah, I mean, it's so heartbreaking to watch somebody
Was your
love.
grandmother around at the time?
Yes.
So she's the one.
Yes. And you know, that's always, I feel like, sort of the biggest thing is the caretakers in their life, and how, you know, how they're being affected.
I call it the collateral damage.
Yeah.
You know, like we have in the war. It's like you've got one person with Alzheimer's, but because what you've got is you've got someone who's dying, and that's always terrible. But they're also losing their ability to function, to make judgments, to know who they are, to know who you are. They become unsafe, they start to wander. So not only are you dealing with losing this person ultimately to death, but also they're disappearing in front of your eyes. And you're, like with my grandparents, their 50-year relationship together. My grandfather didn't know my grandmother at the end.
Right.
So while she's trying to take care of this man, she's also facing that emotional reality and the expense, which is huge. So
right. So if I wanted to get one of those, how would I get one?
there's a website called www.actionalz.org.
Okay.
And that's the champions sort of, and the other website you should know about is www.alz.org, which is for anyone who's dealing with Alzheimer's or has questions. That's the main site. It's a great organization, the Alzheimer's Association, and they have all the answers that we have right now. They have.
Okay, I'm just going to give you a few questions on your favorite things.
Okay.
And just fire back.
I'll say what I can.
Okay, so your favorite place to live?
New York.
Over LA, for sure. Okay, favorite restaurant?
Oh, Cafe Luxembourg.
Favorite clothing store or designer?
Most of my suits are Giorgio Armani,
Oh,
and most of them are from Frasier.
Nice.
I got them.
Oh,
half price.
that is a great thing. Okay,
Okay.
so tell me quickly about Curtains. How can people get tickets? How can people come see you in it?
Oh dear God, I don't know how to get tickets. I just do the show.
Okay,
but
all right.
you can always go to the box office.
Go to the box
it's
office.
at the Hirschfeld Theater, and there's also probably curtains.com, something like that. You go ahead, tell me.
Curtains the Musical.
Curtainsthemusical.com. You can see how many tickets I buy. Yes, that's the best way to go. It's obviously I'm going to say it's a great show, so you can't really believe what I say.
No, but it is a great show. You're
fantastic
totally
family
adorable
show.
in it.
Thank you. Thank
so
you.
adorable. It actually, at one point, I could hear you have this take that you kind of, Jill Pace says something to you, and you sort of turn around like you can't believe it, and you can visibly and audibly hear everyone kind of go, oh. It's just like, oh, we love him.
Oh,
it's
that's
so
great.
adorable.
That's great. Well, you know what? It's an old-fashioned Broadway musical. They don't make them like this anymore, but written by the best in the business, Kander and Ebb. So it's a great opportunity to see Broadway.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking
for
to us
having me.
today. And
Pleasure to be
good
here.
luck with the rest of Curtains and everything.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your show.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you.
Cool.
Good job.
Thank you. I really do. Wait, it's Move and Voice, and what's the other
Open.
one? I want all of them.
Yeah.
I'm going to get them. I love that.